The first tear fell during the third note. No one saw who started it. All they knew was that somewhere in the back of the freezing Kazan Cathedral, an old Russian woman had begun to shake. Her hands covered her mouth. Her shoulders trembled. And before the song even reached its chorus, the entire cathedral was weeping. But here's what makes no sense. The song was in Tagalog, a language none of them spoke, sung by a Filipino nurse named Maria Santos who, 48 hours earlier, didn't even know this cathedral existed. So how did a 5'2" healthcare worker from Kazan City bring 800 Russians to their knees in the middle of December? To understand that, we need to go back 3 weeks. Back to the woman who believed her voice was her curse. Maria Santos had learned to sing quietly. Not because she couldn't sing loud. God knows she could. As a child in Tondo, her voice could cut through the chaos of jeepney horns and street vendors. Church choirs fought over her. Neighbors would stop cooking just to listen. But somewhere along the way, Maria learned that beautiful things don't pay rent. Her mother taught her that. "Anak, you can't feed a family with songs," she'd say, steering Maria toward nursing school. The voice is a gift, but gifts don't put food on the table. So Maria became practical. She studied. She passed her boards. At 24, she started working night shifts at Philippine General Hospital. At 26, she applied for overseas work. At 29, she was crying in a cramped apartment in Moscow, wondering if she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. December in Russia isn't just cold, it's hostile. Maria would leave for her shift at 4 a.m., walking through streets so frozen her tears would crystallize before they reached her chin. The hospital where she worked was understaffed, underpaid, and filled with patients who didn't always want a Filipina touching them. "Go back to your country," one elderly man had spat at her. She'd smiled anyway, changed his bedding, checked his vitals, sang softly under her breath while she worked. Old Filipino hymns her grandmother taught her. She didn't know the old man was listening. She didn't know he hadn't spoken to his daughter in 11 years. She didn't know that the melody she hummed, a forgotten Tagalog Christmas song called Ang Tinig ng Anghel, was about to change everything. Father Dimitri wasn't supposed to be in the hospital that night. He'd come to give last rites to a dying parishioner. But as he walked down the corridor, he heard something that stopped him cold. A voice, soft, warm, singing in a language he didn't recognize. It was coming from room 247. Father Dimitri stood outside, listening. The melody was simple, almost childlike, but it carried something he couldn't name. Not sadness exactly, more like longing, the kind that lives deep in your chest, where words can't reach. He pushed open the door. Maria looked up, startled. "Oh, Father, I'm sorry. Was I too loud?" "No," he said quietly. "What was that song?" Maria blushed. "Just an old Filipino Christmas carol. Ang Tinig ng Anghel. My Lola used to sing it." "What does it mean?" She hesitated. "The voice of the angel. It's about..." She paused, searching for words. "It's about waiting for someone you lost, about how Christmas makes the absence louder." Father Dimitri felt something crack open inside him. He hadn't cried since his mother died. That was 19 years ago. But standing in that fluorescent-lit hospital room, listening to a Filipino nurse explain a song about absence, he felt tears burning behind his eyes. "Would you..." His voice broke. "Would you sing at our cathedral? Christmas Eve?" Maria laughed nervously. "Father, I'm just a nurse. I don't perform..." "Please." He wasn't asking anymore. He was begging. "Our cathedral. It's been silent for too long. We need a voice like yours." Kazan Cathedral had seen everything. Revolution, war, siege, starvation. It had been a museum, a warehouse, a place where faith went to hide. But for the past 30 years, it had been resurrected, restored, repainted. Everything was beautiful again. Everything except the people. Father Dimitri had watched them come year after year, dressed in their finest, singing the traditional hymns, going through the motions of Christmas. But something was missing. The congregation had forgotten how to feel. They'd survived too much. Stalin, the collapse, poverty. They'd learned what Maria's mother had learned. Emotion is a luxury, survival is practical. But Father Dmitri believed something radical. He believed that a people who stop crying will eventually stop living. And he believed this small Filipino woman could teach them how to feel again. December 24th, 2019. The cathedral was packed. 800 people crammed into wooden pews, breath visible in the freezing air. Candles flickered. Incense curled through the darkness. Maria stood backstage, trembling. She'd practiced for 3 weeks. Father Dmitri had hired a translator to help the choir learn the Tagalog phonetically. They'd rehearsed until their tongues bled, trying to wrap around unfamiliar sounds. But even now, minutes before she was supposed to walk out, Maria wanted to run. "What if they hate it?" she whispered to Father Dmitri. He smiled. "They won't. But it's in Tagalog. They won't understand a word." "Maria," he placed a hand on her shoulder. "Music doesn't need translation. Pain does that on its own." The lights dimmed. A single spotlight found her. Maria stepped forward, small and terrified, clutching a microphone like a lifeline. She opened her mouth. "Ang tinig ng anghel, sa dilim ng gabi." Her voice was soft at first, hesitant, but the cathedral's acoustics caught it, amplified it, sent it soaring into the vaulted ceiling. The choir joined, Russian voices stumbling over Filipino words, creating something neither country had ever heard before. And that's when it started. The old woman in the back row didn't mean to cry. She'd buried her son 40 years ago. Car accident, December 23rd. She'd promised herself she'd never cry about it again. But this song, this impossible song in a language she didn't speak, sounded exactly like the lullaby she used to sing to him. The same melody, the same rhythm. How? She would later learn that her grandmother was a Russian missionary who'd lived in Manila in the 1920s, that she'd brought Filipino melodies back to St. Petersburg, that those melodies had mixed, evolved, become something both countries claimed as their own. But in that moment, she didn't know any of that. All she knew was that her son's voice was in that song, and she broke. Then the man beside her, then the woman in front, then the entire cathedral. Not polite tears, not quiet ones, sobbing, shoulders shaking, people clutching each other, strangers holding hands. A young mother pressed her face against her daughter's hair. An old man buried his head in his hands. Maria didn't stop singing, even as her own tears fell, even as her voice cracked. She sang about angels in the darkness, about voices that guide you home, about how Christmas is the night when the dead feel closest. And when she reached the final line, "Wag kang matakot, nandito lang ako." "Don't be afraid, I'm right here." The entire cathedral collapsed into a silence so complete, you could hear snowflakes hitting the windows outside. Then the priest began to clap, slow, reverent, and 800 people rose to their feet, not applauding, thanking. Maria didn't become famous. She went back to her nursing shifts, back to her cramped apartment, back to changing bed sheets and checking vitals. But something had changed. The old man who told her to go back to her country, he asked for her specifically the next week, apologized, told her his daughter's name was Maria too, that they hadn't spoken since his wife died, that hearing her sing reminded him that love was louder than pride. He called his daughter that night. Father Dmitri would later say that Christmas Eve changed his entire parish, that people started crying during services again, hugging longer, forgiving faster. "You taught us something we'd forgotten," he told Maria months later. "You taught us that grief isn't weakness. It's proof we love someone." Maria never thought her voice mattered. Her mother had taught her that gifts don't pay rent. But standing in that cathedral, watching 800 strangers weep over a song about angels and absence, Maria finally understood something her grandmother always knew. Some gifts aren't meant to pay rent. Some gifts are meant to pay debts. The debt we owe to our dead, the debt we owe to our hearts, the debt we owe to the parts of ourselves we buried because survival demanded silence. Here's the part that'll break you. Ang Tinig ng Anghel wasn't a famous song. It was written in 1952 by a Filipino composer named Carmen Cita Reyes after her son died of pneumonia. She sang it once, at his funeral, then never again. The song was forgotten, lost, until a Russian missionary's daughter found the handwritten lyrics in a Manila convent in 1968 and brought them back to St. Petersburg, where it became a local lullaby, sung in Russian, stripped of its origin story, passed down through generations until no one remembered where it came from, until Maria sang it in its original language. And the cathedral remembered, not consciously, not intellectually, but the way your body remembers trauma, the way your heart remembers love. They didn't understand the words, but their bones did. You might think this story is about music. It's not. It's about the lie we've been sold. The lie that emotion is a luxury, that survival means staying hard, that feeling too much will break us. But here's the truth. We're already broken. Every one of us walking around with ghosts we don't name, losses we don't mourn, songs we don't sing because we're terrified of what might happen if we do. And what happened in that cathedral? 800 people gave themselves permission to shatter. And when they did, they found something underneath the shards. Each other. That's what Maria's voice did. Not because it was technically perfect, not because the Tagalog was poetry, but because it was brave enough to be soft in a world that demands hardness. And that bravery gave everyone else permission to do the same. Maria still works night shifts in Moscow. She still sings quietly while she works. But now when patients ask what she's humming, she tells them. She tells them about the cathedral, about the weeping, about the Russian grandmother who told her, through tears and broken English, "Thank you for bringing my mother's voice back." And sometimes late at night when the hospital is quiet and the Moscow winter presses against the windows, Maria thinks about her own mother, the one who taught her that gifts don't pay rent. And she whispers into the darkness, "Mama, you were wrong. Some gifts don't pay rent. Some gifts pay for the right to be human again." The end.